My name's Michael, and I love to cook. I've been cooking for about 10 years now, and I was responsible for making dinner maybe once or twice a week for the family. I would love digging through the spice cabinet to try and find different spices that I could add just to make things taste a little bit better. This interest in cooking continued on after I moved out, and I was faced with kind of the dilemma that most college students are faced with, where I was suddenly responsible for all of my own food. Over time, my experiments with food started to get a little more elaborate as I explored different ways to present food to make it look good. I remember at one point I went through a sandwich phase, and I was just obsessed with making sandwiches because they were cheap, they were easy, they were really simple. I bought different fancy breads, I bought different sauces, different fresh ingredients in an attempt just to make these really good sandwiches, and every single time I was always so disappointed because it felt like what I came up with was never as good as just going to Subway. From my sandwich experience, I learned that while ingredients were important, there's a lot more to food than just ingredients. Technique had a lot to do with it. I had the opportunity when I was younger through the Boy Scouts to travel extensively through the US. One of the things that I would always insist on doing whenever I traveled places was to eat at someplace local. I was really interested in tasting the particular flavors of the area or seeing food that was made a little bit differently than what I was used to. Let's see, on my travels I've had all kinds of different foods. I've had milkshakes in retro Los Angeles diners, macarons in Beverly Hills, mountain pizza pies in Colorado ordered by the pound and with honey on the crust, homemade southern barbecue in Tennessee, that stuff was good, crab cakes on the shores of Maryland, cheesesteaks in Philadelphia, of course sourdough on the piers of San Francisco. I never really understood why you can't get sourdough as a standard bread option at Subway anywhere outside of parts of California and a little bit of the Southwest. Pie shakes in the Pacific Northwest, banana cream? Something called horseshoes on a trip to central Illinois, which I don't really still understand what that was. I had a traditional lobster dinner with Maine blueberry pie while I was in Maine in Bar Harbor. I remember on one trip I was driving back cross country from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I was going to go through New Orleans. I had never been to New Orleans before, and I wanted to try some local food. I didn't really have much of a plan, but I just pulled off of the highway and drove through some streets until I found a popular cafe and stopped there and ate some lunch. Those are some of the best beignets and jambalaya I have ever had. No matter where I traveled, my main focus was always bringing back ingredients just to try at home, just to bring back a little bit of that flavor. A few years ago, I was on a family trip to Scotland, and one of the main things I would look for in any of the gift shops or stores or places that we passed was an opportunity to get some food. I got to go Scotch tasting. It was really cool. We stopped at a distillery up in the Scottish Highlands called Dalwhinnie. I hope I'm saying that right. And they would serve us different chocolates to go with it, and it was absolutely delicious. I got salts, I got jams, I got marmalades, I got honeys, I got all kinds of things that were made unique in the area. A major turning point in my cooking experience was getting a cookbook from America's Test Kitchen. I started to really focus in on and dive into the techniques of how I was cooking things, not just the ingredients I was using, just to make things taste that much better. I continued cooking like this, getting slowly more elaborate, cooking weekly, sometimes daily, just to get the practice in and just to find better ways to make the food. But last fall, everything changed. I've had this mysterious medical issue going back 15 years now. I talked with many doctors about it. No one could ever seem to figure out what was going wrong. I would have problems with my stomach. I would feel lightheaded. Sometimes I would just pass out, fall to the ground. I just didn't feel very good. These symptoms were getting worse as time went on, and what started as something that would happen maybe every couple of weeks would happen almost daily. For any of you who know me, I love Starbucks. I am an avid Starbucks Rewards member. I have been for several years now, gold status of course, and at one point last summer I actually passed 10,000 stars. The problem was a lot of the Starbucks drinks that I loved, they would cause me a lot of pain, and I loved them so much I would keep getting them, I would keep drinking them anyway, but it got to the point where I just had to give Starbucks up entirely because I couldn't stand the 2 to 3 hours of pain that getting a drink would cause me. I remember it just kind of became part of my routine whenever I went out for food, especially for burgers or for pizza, that I would kind of plan my schedule. That way I didn't have to do a lot of walking, or I could easily sit down after I had eaten, because I wouldn't be able to walk very far. I would get that sinking feeling, feel lightheaded. Sometimes I would just feel horrible for an hour or two after eating. That went on for so long that I don't even remember what it's like to eat a hamburger anymore without feeling that. Things took a turn for the worse last fall. I was at school really late one night and I figured I would have some dinner, so I went over to the Panda Express. I didn't notice anything different at first, but as I stood in line and I started to notice a little change of my breathing. It was different than an asthma attack. It was different than being sick. It was like I could breathe into my lungs, but I wasn't getting enough air. It was kind of like when you would pull the covers over your head when you're a child reading a book or whatever, and over time it would become more difficult to breathe. It felt just like that. As I was waiting there, slowly moving up through the line, I was just feeling more and more uncomfortable. I was having a hard time thinking. I couldn't focus. I just knew I had to get out of there. By the time that I paid, I could barely walk in a straight line. Things appeared to get better as soon as I got out of the store. I found out later that wasn't actually the case. I felt okay, so I went over, found a nice table outside. It was still pretty warm, as it often is here in Arizona. Figured I would at least enjoy the food that I had just gotten. Normally when I go to Panda Express, I get the white rice, not the fried rice, and a few minutes into eating the fried rice, I started to notice things were very different. I was biting down and I realized that my teeth were scraping against the sides of my cheek. It was like my cheek kept getting in the way. My whole face was actually swelling. I didn't feel too great. I felt very tired. I was utterly exhausted. I was having a hard time staying awake. Fortunately, I was aware enough of what could be going on to call a friend and ask for some help. To add some complication to this, the symptoms made me start shaking very violently. I could barely move around, I could barely walk, I could barely get down the stairs back to the street level to get in the car once my friends arrived to pick me up. My friends drove me over to the urgent care. I went in, saw the nurse, and I just remember the look she gave me when I had explained what happened, and she just pointed at the door and said, "You need to go to the emergency room right now." Probably the worst part of being in the emergency room that night was walking away having absolutely no idea what had happened or what was wrong. They couldn't find anything to tell me. I figured it was probably some kind of allergic reaction. At this point, I had no known food allergies. I remember every time that I walked past the Panda Express, I would start to get a little bit nauseous again, so I had to change how I would walk between classes to make sure that I avoided it each time. I continued cooking as I always do. I made the meals that I normally do. I felt okay. There was nothing as weird as what happened that one night. Now this was November, so I was putting on a Thanksgiving dinner like I had in previous years. This year I decided to go a little bit extra and invite over 12 guests actually and serve them a full 4-course meal. Naturally, since I'm learning how to still serve large groups of people, I made way too much food. But on the plus side, I had leftovers for weeks. Unfortunately, the symptoms started to come back again. In fact, they wouldn't stop. I was experiencing issues on an almost daily basis by the end of November. I remember times when I would just be on the floor in agonizing discomfort, unable to move. I would be shaking uncontrollably. I wouldn't be able to get up. I could barely form complete, coherent sentences. Things were not going well at all. I ended up in the emergency room 4 times that month. I had more blood drawn from me in that 2-month period than I had in the 10 years prior. I saw doctors, I saw specialists, I saw neurologists, I saw all kinds of people trying to figure out what exactly was going wrong. It wasn't until I was back in California for the winter break that I actually saw the allergist that I had been seeing since literally before I was born. He actually agreed with me that what I had experienced that one night was probably an allergic reaction, and he suggested that a lot more of what I was experiencing could be allergies as well. He said that I needed to get tested. 2 months and a medical insurance change later, I was finally able to get in. Based on everything that they had heard, the allergist decided to run a full gamut of food tests on me. I was diagnosed with 17 food allergies, and an 18th one developing. Let's see. Milk, egg, wheat, soybean, peanut, cashew, almond, pistachio, sesame, salmon, tuna, halibut, flounder, perch, shrimp, lamb, and buckwheat. And things aren't looking good for coconut either. There's not much that you can do about food allergies except not eat things that trigger symptoms. My doctor informed me that I had to strictly adhere to cutting all of these foods out of my diet completely. A lot of the symptoms I had been experiencing, the stomach discomfort, the lightheadedness, the fainting spells, inability to get up off the ground, these were all actually different symptoms, lesser known symptoms of anaphylaxis. The commonly thought of symptom with anaphylaxis, which I did experience that night with the Panda Express, is when your throat starts to close up and swell and you can't breathe anymore. You can die of suffocation. What I was experiencing was known as a vasovagal reaction. This is basically when your blood vessels will dilate, thus causing your blood pressure to drop, lightheadedness, and me to fall to the ground or pass out or be unable to move or just feel really anemic and weak in general. Left untreated, these anaphylactic reactions can be just as dangerous as throat closing. Your heart will simply stop beating. Of course, after learning all of this, I had to start paying a lot more attention to food labels and really looking at what was in the food that I was eating. My entire diet was basically upended. I couldn't really bake much anymore. I couldn't have flour, I couldn't have milk, I couldn't have eggs. I use butter in basically everything that I cook. Butter sauces are my favorite. I was never really a big fan of milk. Now we know why. But even the alternative milks that I would frequently use when I would make smoothies, almond milk, coconut milk, I couldn't have these either. I was never really a big fan of eggs. We also now know why. Nor could I really stand to eat a lot of pastries or breads, so I eventually settled on a breakfast that I could finally eat, which was lox, and salmon being on that list meant I couldn't have those anymore either. One of the most interesting discoveries that I made is how prevalent some of these ingredients are beyond even what we think about. I can't have most prepackaged food because almost all prepackaged food contains at least one of these ingredients. As an example, soybeans are actually very prevalent in a lot of the packaged food in grocery stores. A lot of sauces, a lot of products, a lot of condiments are made with or cooked in vegetable oil. The most common form of vegetable oil is soybean oil. I, of course, also couldn't eat out for similar reasons. Almost any place that you try to get food, especially fast food, is going to contain some of these ingredients. If you think about what we consume for fast food as Americans, it's basically hamburgers, pizza, fried chicken, hot dogs, sandwiches, tacos, pastries. Even places that offer common substitutes, such as my beloved Starbucks, wouldn't work. While I couldn't have milk in the drinks, the common substitutes were soy, almond, and coconut. Overall, I felt pretty terrible about this. I suddenly didn't know what to eat anymore. I couldn't bake, I couldn't make a lot of the foods that I previously made, so I just kind of went with eating fresh fruits and vegetables and maybe some prepared meat. I thought of all the places that I traveled and the different ingredients that I had gotten, and I realized that I couldn't do a lot of that again. I would never be able to eat at most of those places again. My exploration of food, my hobby at home, so much I felt had been ripped away from me. My dreams of being a foodie and amateur chef all but evaporated. I was talking with a friend the other day who happens to be vegan and was discussing some options for food substitutes. That conversation reminded me of something that I had read about in the America's Test Kitchen book. I remembered what I had learned previously about more than just the ingredients mattering, about the way that you prepare the food and the techniques that you use and the ingredients that you choose. The roles that the ingredients play in what you're making is what matters. I realized that as long as I learned the techniques and I learned and understood, truly understood why certain ingredients were used in the recipes, that I could actually find adequate substitutes. This was a way for me to continue to enjoy the food that I had always loved. My passion was very much still alive. The beauty of cooking is that anyone can do it. With a little bit of practice and the right techniques, you can make food that fits your needs and that you can enjoy. You don't have to be an expert. I'm now on a journey to discover what goes into the food we eat, why it matters, and how we can use this knowledge to make our food taste better. Cooking with Them is a nod to my non-binary identity and accompanying quirky personality, and my refusal to let being a little different stand in my way. Cooking with Them is also the realization that you don't have to be a chef or in perfect health or free of dietary restrictions in order to make great food that you enjoy. The chefs, the allergy-free, the dietary unrestricted, no matter who you are, you can cook with them. I'm Michael, and welcome to Cooking with Them. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Doing so will really help me out. I'll be able to make more, bring you more tips, and pursue my passions of creative content and cooking. See you next time.